on? We're online?
Yeah.
All right, wonderful. Well, good evening, and I am Angela Charles, Director of Charlotte Water. And I welcome you to the public meeting for Charlotte Water's Interbasin Transfer Modification request. Just a few housekeeping items, restrooms. If you, of course, go out this room, make a left, go past the lobby and to the right, you will find restrooms. If there's an emergency, there's an exit here to my left, your right. And again, if you would follow a Charlotte Water employee for proper exiting of the building. Do we have any elected officials present? Any present online? Okay. Let me also, I have a person here that I'd like to introduce, Harold Brady. Harold, if you'll raise your hand there. He is he's the Water Supply Development Coordinator for the Division of Water Resources, Water Planning Section. And he's with North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. Thank you, Harold, for being here. We also have a Charlotte Water IBT core team. And so as I introduce you, if you just stand and raise your hand so that folks in the audience can see you. That is Deputy Director Ron Hargrove, David Sayre, Deputy Director Sean Kaufman, Attorney Thomas Powers, and Jennifer Frost. We also have some other Charlotte Water folks. If you just raise your hands so folks to know who you are, that's good. And thank you all for being here and for supporting us in this effort. We do have Browning Caldwell, Chernoff Newman, and North Carolina Aqua Law also assisting Charlotte Water throughout this process. So thank you all for your help. Again, thank you to the attendees here and online. Just a quick reminder that this is a public meeting, not a public hearing. We are here to get input, obtain input, and hear comments regarding our request. This request is for transfer. It is not for withdrawal. So we learned last night, this is our second public meeting, but last night it seems as if there was some confusion regarding what our intent is. And the intent is not to take more water out of the Catawba River. We want to increase the transfer. That's what's called interbasin transfer. And Ron Hargrove will talk more about that. This is a multi-year process. It is not a one and done, or it's not already done. This will take several years for our utility to go through this process. More data analysis will occur. And again, after Carol comes up, and then Ron to explain what's happening within Charlotte Water, then we want to hear from folks here, their comments and thoughts about what we're doing, our approach, and just it's very, very open. We're being very open and we're being transparent. Okay, so let's talk about how it's gonna go today. Okay, so we're gonna have the IBT program overview. That will be done by Harold Brady. Then again, Deputy Director Ron Hargrove will talk about our modification request, and then I'll come back up and ask for comments and questions. Are there any questions so far? You good? Okay, Harold, I am going to turn it over to you. Jennifer, is Jennifer here? She's not here. Okay, with Harold. Do you know how to put these?
I should be able to figure this out.
Okay, all right, put that on your. All right, turn it on. Green light is on and you're ready.
All right,
Okay, and here's your clicker. You need your clicker.
fantastic. Well, thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Try to see if I can still. Right here. There we go. Angela, thank you so much. So I'm just going to give a brief overview. Can you still? Just give a brief overview on what an interbasin transfer is, what the process is. Once again, I'm Harold Brady. I'm from Department of Environmental Quality, Division of Water Resources. I work in the Water Supply Planning Branch as the Water Supply Development Coordinator. So, basics of interbasin transfer, kind of what is a river basin type basics. Then we get into some statutory language, what the process is for this modification request, and what the EMC's decision considerations are that are in statute. Okay. So, just starting off very basic here, we're talking about surface water. We're not talking about groundwater at all. It's surface water transfer from one basin, so you withdraw from one basin and discharging into another basin, river basin. And the purpose of the IBT law is to ensure it's good public policy to move water between those basins. So the General Assembly has made it clear that this is very important to them. And it's important to all of us. Here's the statute. I always show this slide. Even though this is a modification, just to give folks an idea of what the threshold for having to get a certificate is. Charlotte Water already has a certificate. It was issued in 2002 for 33 million gallons a day based on max day transfer. But for all other communities across the state who are transferring water between basins, which you'll see later on when I talk, it happens quite a lot because most of the communities in the state are built on a ridge line. So if you have a source on one side and then you discharge to the other, you're going to end up with some type of transfer. That 2 million gallons a day is what that threshold right there, that threshold is for having to get a certificate. And that is what typically catches folks into water systems into getting an IBT certificate. These other two deal with some very specific issues that quite honestly don't really come up very much. Okay, so just basic couple of examples of what I'm talking about with interbasin transfer. And before I jump into it, I want to go through and say, just remind, so the transfer is the withdrawal minus the return. So it's important to know it's the net transfer and not the gross. There are a number of communities across the state that move water from one basin because their community is built on a ridge line. They move water over there, but then their discharge plant is back into the source basin. And so they don't have to get an IBT certificate because they never tripped that 2 MGD threshold. But here's a couple of examples that are not that. So the first example, we're in the source basin. You got 10 MGD withdrawal out of this river here that the town is using. The town service area, that circle right there, is right on the ridge line. Okay, so on the source basin side, they're using about 2 MGD, and on the receiving basin side, they're using about 3. By using, I'm saying that is consumptively lost. So they're using it either through septic, or maybe they're watering cars, washing cars, watering lawns, those type things. And then they have their collection system, their wastewater collection system collects the remainder 5 and discharges that through their wastewater treatment plant into the receiving basin. So in that example, you've got the 5 that goes to the receiving basin through the wastewater plant, and you've got an additional 3 that's lost consumptively onto the ground into the receiving basin. So that's 8. In example B, the town, the withdrawals and discharges are the same amounts. The difference is the town is entirely within the receiving basin. So all of that 5 is considered the IBT, the transfer to the receiving basin. And they return the other 5 back to the source basin. They would still need to get an interbasin transfer certificate, even though they discharge through their wastewater plant back to the source basin. Transfer is determined by the amount of water moved from the source basin to receiving basin. Okay, talked a lot about river basins. Let's talk about let's look at the map. Now, this map was drawn by the General Assembly, so it doesn't exactly follow the hydrologic unit code, the river basins that we usually talk about, the USGS river basin map. But in the Catawba, the lines follow those units pretty closely, And there's two sub-basins in the larger Catawba Basin, 3-1, which is Catawba, and 3-2, South Fork Catawba. The other basin to be that's involved here is 18-4. That is the Rocky Basin and part of the larger Yadkin River Basin. Okay, just a handful of quick things sort of to understand about interbasin transfers. So as I mentioned before, there's well over 100 water systems that are built, communities are built right on the ridgeline. And so they're transferring water from their source basin over to receiving basin just by the nature of where the town is constructed, which is wise to build on the ridgeline as opposed to building down in the floodplain. But nonetheless, those are transfers, and those are the state through our local water supply planning program keeps an eye on those transfers. 80% of all those are under 1 MGD, so they're very small towns and communities across the state. There have been 9 certificates have been issued since the statute was established in 1993. And I'll go through the 9 or show it up on the slide that goes through what the 9 are. And there's only been one previous IBT certificate modification, and that was about 10 years ago when the towns of Cary and Apex had to modify their certificates for growth within their service area. There are grandfathered or pre-existing allowances for systems that are transferring over 2 million gallons a day prior to July 93. So there has to be the infrastructure was in the ground at that time when the statute was issued. So the General Assembly, I think in their wisdom, it needed to draw a line in the sand, saying, okay, now you already have the infrastructure in place at this time. You don't have to get a certificate moving forward. And there's a number of systems that have moved a significant amount of water, Durham being one of them, as well as Statesville. Statesville gets its water from the Catawba, and all of their service area is in the Yadkin. And I need to say there are a handful of water systems that are getting close to that 2 MGD threshold. And so when we see that using the tools that we have, using GIS along with those local water supply plan data, and we see that water systems are within that 80% threshold of 2 MGD, we reach out to them and tell them and let them know, like, you need to establish a plan for what you're going to do regarding interbasin transfers. And then once they hit that 90% threshold, so 1.8, they need to enact that plan, put that plan into work, so that to avoid a compliance issue. Okay, and here are the 9 systems. I don't necessarily need to go through all these. The first one being Piedmont Triad. That's like Randleman when it came online. And the second one was Charlotte Water in 2002. Cary actually preceded those, but since they had their modification in 2015, I moved the date down to number 6. Yeah, so you can see Charlotte Water 2002, that certificate for 33 million gallons a day from the Catawba to the Rocky. Moving down, number 8, Union County. I know that worked on that one, and that was regionally right around here. And the last one that went through was Pender County in 2018. We are working with the town of Fuquay-Varina on their interbasin transfer request. Those public meetings occurred during the pandemic in 2020. They're still working through the process. So let's talk process. Since this is a modification, it follows, there's that 22L subsection V. And subsection V details what is required for a modification. As I go through this, I'm going to add a little bit as how it pertains to the existing settlement agreement between North Carolina and South Carolina, which is defining some of the actions that are happening now. So there's 3 steps in an interbasin transfer certificate process. First one is this notice of intent, this NOI document that goes to the Environmental Management Commission or the EMC. Per subsection V, there aren't these public meetings. These aren't necessarily required. However, the settlement agreement that was established in 2010 compels applicants to do these public meetings in the Source River Basin. There's the second step. Once that first step is done, you get to the second step, and that's the environmental document. There will be a public hearing associated with that environmental document process. By the statute, an EA is required, environmental assessment, but by the settlement agreement, an EIS is required for that. So we will be going through an EIS process. And you can see we get all the way down to the end, and the Environmental Management Commission will issue their adequacy, and the Department of Environmental Quality will issue the ROD, the record of decision on that EIS document. And then you get to 3, which is the final decision. So they take all the technical information and comments and all the information from steps 1 and 2 and have a final decision. All right, so I was talking about the EMC, the Environmental Management Commission. Let's talk about what their considerations are. They have an awful lot of flexibility in their decisions. So I'm just pulling this straight out of the statute. They can grant that certificate in whole or in part, flat out deny it, or require any types of mitigation measures that they see fit through that process. And in making this determination, the EMC is required to specifically consider. This is very important. I really kind of stress this slide to folks, because as you're issuing comments to Charlotte Water and to the EMC, in as much as you can couch those comments and frame those with these 9 findings, it is helpful for all parties to be able to address those comments and actually work through them. So the first one is necessity and reasonableness of the project. That's the purpose and need. And that's really the first chapter, if you will, of the environmental impact statement, is this purpose and need statement, where the system will go through and will do demand projections out 30 years. All of this is based on a 30-year projection. And then from those demand projections, how much will need to be transferred to settle those demands. The second one, what are the impacts on the source basin? So it's the Catawba River Basin. What are the impacts? That gets into using things like the Cheops model here in the Catawba River Basin. The third point is, it's very similar, but it's looking at indirect and cumulative impacts on the source basin. So number 2 is really looking at what would be the direct impacts of this. And then number 3 is, well, what are our sort of long-term indirect and cumulative impacts from a project such as this on the source basin. Number 4 gets into both the direct and indirect and cumulative impacts to the receiving basin. In this case, it's the Rocky River Basin, part of the larger Yadkin Basin. And to do that, we'll be looking at using the OASIS model that's available in the Yadkin Basin to technically answer those questions of impacts. 5, looking at what are the alternatives to the proposed alternative, to the proposed transfer? What else can we do besides just moving that water in the way that has been proposed? Yeah, and that will be, that's in that environmental impact statement as well. 6 is using impoundment of storage capacity. So Charlotte has 2 intakes, one on Lake Norman and one in Mountain Island Lake. So There will be discussion as to how that impacts that storage capacity in those two projects. Number 7 deals with, very similar to 6, but it's allocations out of Corps of Engineers reservoirs. That's not applicable here. 8, how does the service area fit on the landscape? So is the service area on both river basins, which straddles both river basins, which this project certainly does, both the Catawba and the Rocky, or is it looking just in the receiving basin? Is it like my earlier examples, at example 1 and example 2, where 2 was all the service area was in the receiving basin. And then, as I mentioned before, the flexibility that the EMC has, they can consider any other facts and circumstances that are reasonable. Few more items. The conditions and limitations on IBT certificates. So this is in the statute. Now, as I go through these, I want to stress this right here. The EMC can impose additional conditions as they see fit going through the process. And they certainly have added conditions to certificates in the past that were outside of what the statute compels to include. So specific conditions required by the statute, those are the 3, really. That water conservation plan, the drought management plan, and a compliance and monitoring plan. We have quarterly monitoring reports, which came on, that happened sometime in the 2010s is when that statute changed. Previously with what Charlotte Water, the certificate that I have now, it's annual annual monitoring reports, but it has changed to quarterly. There's a condition to reopen and amend and modify if necessary. So if something changes significantly in the basin and the EMC feels compelled to reevaluate the certificate, they have the ability. And if they find something in the EIS or other documents that they use to issue the certificate that is errant, they have the ability to reopen that as well, reopen the document. So, and this is very important, this last one here, that there's no selling of transferred water to water systems that are not co-applicants on the certificate. So this is where that type of planning ahead is crucial for the applicant to reach out to all of the communities around the area who they may be selling water to, either currently selling water to, or even into the future, looking out 30 years. Will you be selling water to these communities around, and really think, it really encourages that long range planning, because the General Assembly made it pretty clear that this isn't an effort to make money. This is not that at all. That you need to go ahead and think about who the co-applicants are ahead of time, and those will be baked into your demands, which drive the transfer. Okay. That's it. I asked Ron to come up now to speak to the project specifically, but certainly if there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, yeah. I'm walking off. I can sit there. Yeah. Sorry, Ron. No problem. Thank you.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my name's Ron Hargrove. I'm one of the deputy directors here, and I will share with you a little bit about Charlotte Water, or what an IBT is, kind of rehashing a little bit of what Harold shared with you, but with Charlotte Water data. Why an IBT modification is needed now. What's the process and schedule, as well as what alternatives are being considered at a concept level, at least for now, and then how can you come and participate, is when Angel will come back up and close us out. About Charlotte Water, Charlotte Water obviously serves all of Mecklenburg County. It is our complete service area. We also have interlocal agreements with just about every county surrounding Charlotte and Mecklenburg. For both on the west side in Gaston County, as well as in South Carolina, York County, Lancaster County, as well as Union and Cabarrus counties. Charlotte Water Service Area also includes a small portion of southern Iredell County that's in the town of Davidson. We're the largest public utility in North and South Carolina, serving over a population of over 1.1 million. We have about 320,000 connections across the service area. The area, right in that area right there is in the Rocky River Basin in the dark highlighted area. And that's the area that our transfer occurs in. We like to tell everybody that we're proactive planners. I think a good utility, a sound utility does look ahead in the future to determine what's coming and get prepared for it. So we proactively plan. The 2002 IBT is an example of that. We had to look out 30 years and project what our water transfer potential was. And so that study work was done, and there was a request made for 33 million gallons. And we think that's going to lead us out and not be exceeded by the year 2030. But we're going to get real close, which is why we're starting to study it now. We've been a long-term partner with the Catawba Water Management Group. That's a regional planning kind of group looking at the Catawba River Basin. Their mission is to help extend, preserve the Catawba Water Reef for the human and the ecological needs. And so we've been one of the founding members of that group, and Duke Energy, along with 17 other utility partners that are members of that group, maybe 18 now, and all with that same goal in mind. And then we have local and regional conservation and drought planning. Being a part of the Catawba Water Management Group, you have to be a member of the Catawba Water Drought Monitoring Advisory Group that also issues a low inflow protocol when certain triggers are present in the basin, whether it be reservoir target levels, whether it be drought monitor advisories, or whether it be groundwater reductions. Everybody in the basin goes into a conservation mode when the LIP is issued. So what is an interbasin transfer? Again, here was kind of pictorial there, but this is Charlotte water data. As Angela said, we're not talking about withdrawal from the Catawba River. We are talking about what is consumed across the ridge line. That's what our request is about. We currently have a certificate to transfer 33 million gallons, either through consumptive losses or what's discharged into the Rocky River. Most of our service is in the Catawba Basin as far as demands. We withdraw 117 million gallons a day from the Catawba River through 2 intakes. 22 million is consumed. We return 75 million back through our 4 existing current treatment plants. One of our plants is in the Rocky River, so there's a discharge there. And then we have an interlocal agreement with the Water and Sewer Authority, Cabarrus County, that is the remainder of our discharge. How that happens, I think the statutes talk about there being a withdrawal or diversion of water. How it happens is through the utility system. We draw out the Catawba River, we pump it to one of our 3 water treatment plants. It gets treated to potable drinking water standards, distributed to the customers and our distribution system for their use as they see fit. We collect the wastewater that's not consumed back, and it goes through our system back to a wastewater treatment plant to be treated to at a minimum our permit standards. We want to get it as clean as we possibly can before it's discharged back to a stream. 4 of those happen in the Catawba. 1 of those does not in our system, and then we have partnerships with others that discharge further into the Rocky River. Again, just a little more information. We have 2 intakes, and Catawba Mountain Island Lake is our largest intake. Lake Norman is the newest one, and a little bit smaller. We have 3 water treatment plants in the county. We have the 4 wastewater treatment. We have 4 wastewater treatment plants in the Catawba Basin. Our Mallard Creek plant is in the Rocky River Basin. And then the arrows pictorial are where we have outfalls going to the Water and Sewer Authority of Cabarrus County to be treated at their Rocky River Regional Plant. We do have a very small package plant down here serving a subdivision, ash plantation. Why is an IBT modification needed now? Our 33 MGD is measured on a peak day basis, the one single day of the year that we transfer the most water. So that's what we have to report to Harold's group with the WR. And so we send them a report annually. I guess we're gonna have to start doing that quarterly as we're getting above that 80% level. For 2023, we're 79% of that. That's why you see this little bit tick down. The blue lines are our peak day IBTs since 2005. And so what we've done as far as the forecast is projected kind of a range of amounts that could be transferred. I know there's a number out in space. We could go up to a 30 million gallon additional request. We're not sure of that. We have not made an official request for a number. That's what we're asking the public to give us feedback on what alternatives we should consider. And once all that study work is done, if we still need an IBT, then we'll pick a number to submit to the EMC at the appropriate time. But we do expect our 33 million gallon a day limit to be close here in the next 5 or so years. Our average day numbers are shown here. This is the average day transfer. So in 2023, we were at 26.2 million or so, and in 2023, our average day was about 20 million. What's the modification process? Just want to show everybody that we're really just starting this game. I think somebody mentioned today, if we're playing baseball, we haven't even got up to the batter's box. We're really, I've only published a notice of intent with the EMC that we're going to start this process and set up these public meetings. This is the second of at least 6 that we're going to do. So we're here today, the public meetings and the comment period. The comment period lasts 30 days after the last public meeting. So we're extending that out until August 30th. We have volunteered to do an expanded stakeholder engagement process and public meeting process, just to make sure we're transparent and that we're receiving all the feedback we need to go into to the study work, the alternatives analysis, and the EIS. We volunteered also to do an EIS. I know there's a little bit of differences between the North Carolina statutes and the settlement agreement. We thought the best approach was to do an EIS. And so we're also including the South Carolina agencies as the major stakeholder through the process. And we'll be holding 2 meetings in South Carolina later in the maybe next month. Our alternatives analysis will have to be part of the study work. And that's what we're kind of looking for our public to give us what alternatives should we consider through the process. Then the IBT study work, going through kind of what Harold was talking about, the cumulative and secondary impacts will be. Once that happens, we'll submit all that information to DEQ. They'll develop an EIS statement and issue a record of decision. And then it will go into the EMC process for public hearing. We're asking them to, we're doing 2 things with EMC. We're asking them to determine adequacy of our EIS. And then we're also, after that, if they do determine it's adequate, we'll submit our IBT requests for modification at that point in time. That's when we'll pick the number of what the transfer will be, what our forecast will be based upon all the information we gather. The EMC then will issue a draft determination. It'll go to public hearing about their determination, and then after that, all the comments received, they will then make the final determination. Here's kind of a, beyond this point here is a straw man schedule. So we are here with public meetings and notice of intent back in February. And we're going to hold a stakeholder engagement workshop or two. We haven't made that decision. We got to develop what the stakeholder process looks like. But beyond that is all estimated dates for the remainder. So once we get all the comments in through August, through the workshop, we'll then get into the EIS development alternatives analysis that will be a part of the study work. Then we'll send it to DEQ, the draft, and then it follows kind of the schedule that we laid out. So, you know, this is probably a best case schedule. We will fully say that today, but we know this will take time as well as dealing with all the comments that we may receive. To just share with you who all we made aware of this, all the counties in blue, both in the receiving basin and the source basin, were notified. I think it was over 340 different groups or people, 40 newspapers. We published the public meeting notices in when we announced that back in early April. Each unit of local government received them: public water supply systems, water withdrawal and postal transfers, certificate holders, NPDES permit holders, folks on the settlement notification list, as well as other identified stakeholders, COGS, tribal units, NGOs, and others. What alternatives are being considered? You know, we had to pick a few things to look at to determine if we needed to embark on this process. So we did look at how do we maybe pump water, wastewater effluent from our Mallard plant back into the Catawba Basin somehow. How could we increase our water reuse options? Water reuse is one of those things where if you offset what otherwise would be potable demand for irrigation and cooling water with a higher treated effluent, it offsets that and reduces your amount of transfer. Could we expand our system? We looked at maybe a new source in the Yadkin, much like Union County did, and tapping Lake Tillery for their drinking water. And those were at a very high level concept that we studied to determine if we needed to embark on this process. And so based on just really their cost, they were exorbitant. And so we chose to start this process to figure out what other alternatives we need to look at. Alternatives evaluation, capital cost is one of them, schedule, O&M costs, benefits and risk, environmental factors, and construction feasibility. We want actionable alternatives, things that, you know, we should be looking at. Errol had a list of findings of fact the MC has to consider. Things that kind of relate to that are the things that we're looking for. So that's what we're really here to ask the audience. If you know of things that we should be considering, that's what kind of comments and questions and ideas that we need to capture. And then we're going to use those to further refine our EIS scoping document and start with the alternatives analysis. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Angela.
Hey, can you guys hear me? All right, so how can you comment and participate in this process? We have several ways. Again, we want to be as transparent and I want to say accessible as possible. First thing is you can attend a public meeting. Ron mentioned a couple of meetings coming up in South Carolina. We also have a upcoming meeting in Albemarle, North Carolina. And so you can attend the meeting. So by being here today, you are participating in the process. Also, you can go to charlottewateribt.org. Again, that is charlottewateribt.org. And there we have all information. It's like a repository for this process. Also, all comments and questions and records from meetings will be kept on this one website. So you can be anywhere in the world. And if you have access to this, the internet, you can go to charlottewateribt.org and see what's going on as it relates to this process. You can email your comments. So you can go to ibtproject@charlottenc.gov. And we have folks in our organization who will receive that email, that question, that comment. And then again, it will be posted on charlottewateribt.org. At the end of the day, we're beginning this process with the end in mind. We want to be able to go back and look at our journeys, really what we're doing. And we want to have a log of every comment, every question. And so either you can go to the website or you can just email it, and we're trying to make it as convenient as possible. You can also comment on the draft EIS during the public hearing for determination of adequacy by the Environmental Management Commission. So you can go and comment on our draft EIS during the public hearing. That will be available to anyone, and they can participate that way. You can participate that way. You can also comment during the Environmental Management Committee hearing on the draft IBT determination. Okay, so you got two opportunities to comment within the EMC's process, okay, on what Charlotte Water is trying to achieve. Okay, so public meetings, we are here at public meeting number 2, which is here held in Charlotte. Then we have meeting number 3, which is next Wednesday in Albemarle from 5:30 to 7 at the E.E. Waddell Community Center in the banquet room at 621 Wall Street. So the next opportunity to participate in a public meeting will be meeting number 3, Albemarle, North Carolina, E.E. Waddell Community Center. And so we hope to see folks attend there in that part of the Rocky River Basin. We do have 2 upcoming meetings. We are now scheduling and looking at calendars, and both of those will be in South Carolina. Tentatively, we're looking at Florence, South Carolina, and Camden, South Carolina, for both of those meetings. And of course, all of our public meetings are virtual and online. And again, that's a way for the community and citizens to participate and listen in this process. The recordings of our public meetings will also be on charlottewateribt.org. Okay, so now we're going to go to our comment period. And we have Harold and Ron. And what we want, what we would like is that if you have a question or a comment, you can go to, and that's Jennifer Frost, who is up there. It's Jennifer waving her hand. Also, when I talked about the Charlotte Water IBT core team, I did not mention Colin Steichler. So Colin, if you raise your hand, he's a new addition and he's helping us with some coordination also. But I will now open the floor up for any questions or comments. Well, I don't mind starting off, and my question is for Harold. Harold, can you go back to your basin map? And I can do it here. And actually, it's on Ron's map also. So I noticed that there are two Catawba River basins here. One is Catawba River Basin, and then there's a South Fork Catawba River Basin. So is that considered one basin, or if water is moved between those two, even though they both have the name Catawba River in them, would that be considered an IBT?
Yes, so you have the major basin, that's Catawba River. And within that major basin, you have two, what we call sub-basins. 3-1 is the Catawba River Basin, and 3-2 is the South Fork Catawba. If an entity were to transfer water between those two, which there are some communities that do that, up in the upper part, they would have to get an interbasin transfer certificate, very much the same as what Charlotte Water already has. The process is very similar through them.
Okay, all right. Is that Larry?
It is.
Hey, Larry.
Thank Thomas, he called.
Okay, welcome. Larry, will you introduce yourself?
Yes, ma'am. My name is Larry Shaheen. I'm an attorney at the McIntosh Law Firm, and I represent the Real Estate Building Industry Coalition here in the Mecklenburg County and Greater Area region. If you would mind, if you and your staff could please go into talking about what would happen if this were not to be granted, not just for the development and construction communities, but also for the homeowners of Mecklenburg County.
Thank you. Excellent question.
So, if this were not to be approved, we would be limited to our, interbasin transfer certificate at 33 million gallons a day for a peak day, under our current certification. And the northeast and the eastern part of Mecklenburg County would be limited in its growth unless Charlotte were to invest in alternatives that somehow return some of that water back. Harold, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we exceed our certification, that has an impact on our ability to request a modification.
It would certainly be a compliance issue.
Right. So, you know, you get into things like moratoriums, you get into restrictions, you know, there could be increased conservation. I think some of the communities in Cabarrus County deal with that on water shortage basis now. So, you know, it is a significant capital problem to solve. Not that an IBT is something easy and we're only considering costs, but we got to be smart with what the ratepayers are having to fund in the community. And so we're trying to take a smart approach to what makes the most sense for both our water basin, our source waters, as well as what our ratepayers and our community needs are.
Thank you, Ron. Okay. You introduce yourself. That'd be good for the record.
Good evening, Brandon Jones, Catawba Riverkeeper. Appreciate y'all being out here today and the transparency. I think Harold mentioned it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but y'all will be doing the environmental impact study, alternative analysis on a 30-year time span, correct? But the Catawba Water Management Group is going out to 2100. The newest population data from EPA goes out to 2100. Would y'all be willing, or could you run that same model out further to see what the impacts would be further down the line, so we don't end up in the same spot 30 years from now? First step.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great question. So, and we've had other applicants come through that have, I know Union County did, they looked out 50 years. But for consistency purpose, and it's important to be consistent with these certificates that are issued, permits and certificates. The EMC has always looked at that 30-year window. It's in rules, in administrative rule now, that's the number that they're looking for, is that 30-year number. But like I said, Union County, they were looking out 50 years. Other applicants have looked out further within their EIS document as to what would that be, and even measuring impacts as to what that would look like.
So thanks, Brandon, for that question. As a member of the Catawba Water Management Group, you know, we believe in the planning for the river basin, and we have supplied our local water supply planning in that process to update the KEOPS model. And so those forecasts are being ran off. I think it's a 50-year projection now. So it is extended out beyond the 30-year. And so they're considering all those factors in that model update, water demands being one, climate change with increased temperature and increased evaporation, as well as future population growth will be considered in that model. The thing that I failed to mention here is Charlotte chose not to start this process until the Catawba Water was further along in the model updates, so that we're using the model that developed by the Catawba Water to be the model to make forecasts and predictions and impacts. We didn't want to go out and do another model since we're a partner of that group and a member. We didn't want a competing model out there that causes controversy and dispute. So we intentionally chose to wait until they got further along. We're in year 4 of 5 with that model update, we being the Catawba Water. And so we think sometime next year it will be in its final form and for the membership to determine if they are accepting of it.
Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions or just a general comment from the public? Mr. Lineberg, you'll introduce yourself.
He's Harold.
For the record?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you them too. I'll also email it to your address.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Lineberger. I'm gonna do something I typically don't do, and that's read. You know, in these processes, words matter. And I understand that there are some folks, last night, I was planning on being at Hickory, and Mother Nature had a different idea for me. But this is what I would have said last night when folks were expecting Duke Energy to say something. So I'm gonna read this to you, and I think this will be helpful overall in the process. My name is Jeff Lineberger. I'm the General Manager of Water Strategy, Hydro Licensing, and Lake Services for Duke Energy. I'm also the Vice Chair of the Catawba Water Management Group. My comments tonight are on behalf of Duke Energy, not the Water Management Group. The Water Management Group has a lot of further discussion planned regarding interbasin transfers, not just Charlotte's interbasin transfer, and in-basin water demand growth. And I expect more information from the Water Management Group will be forthcoming. That will be helpful here. Water and electricity are absolutely essential. As the impounder of the 11 Lake Catawba Water Hydro Project, Duke Energy certainly has a keen interest in how our shared water supply is used. And that goes for all uses and all communities that use it. It takes a lot of water to make electricity, and likewise, a lot of electricity to make and deliver water. A growing region can't continue to grow without an affordable, reliable, and sustainable supply of both water and electricity, and I don't see that changing. More stakeholder engagement is needed. Duke Energy is committed to working with the Water Management Group and others to conserve and manage the shared water supply. We are asking Charlotte Water to use its creativity and its demonstrated leadership to further enhance the stakeholder engagement process to find the most sustainable, affordable, and reliable solutions to meet the growing water needs. What is ideal? In an ideal world, there would be no interbasin transfers. Water would stay in the river basin in which it falls as rain. Supply and demand are easier to understand in an ideal world. That's not where we live. We don't live in that ideal world. We have to deal with practical realities. Population centers and political boundaries don't follow river basin boundaries. In fact, all 14 of the counties in which the lake system is located have at least 2 defined river basins in them. Think about that. That means supporting growth is likely to require IBTs in many locations. This is not just a Charlotte issue. Take a breath and work together. I would like to encourage all stakeholders to take a deep breath, slow down, roll up our sleeves, and work together. Charlotte Water has raised its hand here to say it's time to start a serious discussion about ways to meet water needs for growth in the eastern part of Mecklenburg County. I expect it will be at least a year or even 2 before they will have completed the options analysis and be ready to propose anything to the DEQ staff. Now is the time for meaningful fact-based conversations to help shape that analysis for the good of the entire river basin. The stakeholders that depend on the water supply are best equipped to come up with solutions based on sound science. Duke Energy is ready, willing, and able to participate in any balanced and collaborative stakeholder engagement process. And finally, in closing, rewards can be great from an engaged process. I want to challenge us all to focus on having an awesome input process. Let's talk about our interests and concerns, not lead with hard positions. With open minds and a collaborative best effort, I know we can find the best solutions. As Helen Keller said, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. That, in fact, was Duke Energy's theme 20 years ago, when we worked with 85 stakeholder organizations to craft a comprehensive relicensing agreement for the hydro project. People told us when we started that in 2003, we would never get to a signed agreement. Well, 3 years later, and many meetings later, we did. And that relicensing agreement was signed by 70 parties, including 27 local governments. So we owe it to each other to build that kind of continued partnership effort with this river and lake system we all share. And I will file that with your email address so it's out there for everybody to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lineberger, and thank you for your leadership. Awesome clap. Do we have any other comments or questions for the record? Okay, if not, I thank you all for your engagement this evening, and everyone have a safe drive home. Thanks again. Meeting adjourned.